All right. Well, I wasn't sure if we were going to be out here this week, so instead of preparing something, I went back and dug through some of the archives from before we started here in the park, actually, or in the school, I should say, and I stumbled upon something we'd either talked about, I don't know when it was, in my living room. It was a book that I read years ago. The book is entitled Sticky Church by Larry Osborne. Subtitle is How I Learned the Power and Importance of Power of Stickiness. And I'm going to read for you guys a significant portion of it because it's a process that this guy went through in thinking through church, and in many ways the lessons that we actually learned over the last several years in building a church, of what attracts people and what gets people to stay. And as we're going to be building relationships here in the park, those same things that attracted people to church early on, and those same things that we did that brought people in, are going to be those same things that keep them around. It's in many ways, and I will attribute this to a lot of the people who stuck around, just are going out to lunch after. I'll probably talk about this a little more. Just offering to invite people to lunch with you and break bread, because we've been talking about that a lot lately. But inviting people to come and have lunch with you after service, and then getting to know them, a relationship gets built. If you guys have gone to church for any period of time in your life, you don't really build relationships while you're sitting in a chair facing forward. It just doesn't happen. And the larger the church is, the more likely it is for people to come in a little bit late and leave right when they're dismissed. And they don't actually take advantage of those moments of having a conversation with somebody and building a relationship. So you could attend a church for a long period of time and not even be known and not know others. And that's not the way the community of faith is supposed to be. So I'm going to read, I should have brought my reading glasses because this is so small on my little iPad. This is way bigger on my computer screen. So I'm going to struggle through reading part of this book to you, and then we'll discuss a little bit at the end. Again, the book is called Sticky Church by Larry Osborne. It starts this way in this passage. I always look back on 1980 to 1983 as the dark years. They weren't particularly tough in anything that really matters. I had good health, a great wife, a new son, an excellent walk with God, but my ministry sucked. I'd come to San Diego filled with dreams and zeal to do great things for God. I was only 28, but I'd had great success in 2 previous churches where I'd served as a youth pastor. I thought I was one of the lucky ones, blessed with a ministry Midas touch. I figured it would be only a matter of time until our little church became a huge church, but within weeks the wheels began to fall off. I quickly discovered that this pastoring gig, even in the church much smaller than my youth groups, was a lot tougher than it looked from a distance. I'd been oblivious to the fact that I'd always built on someone else's foundation. I'd started one college group from scratch and resurrected another from the dead, but the churches themselves were relatively large, providing me with a great fishing pool from which to find leaders and potential students. Now I was on my own. No underpinning, no well-stocked fishing pools, just a cruddy office in a garage of a generous parishioner and a stinky old cafeteria with food fights and skateboards. Sounds like a cool church. Food fights and skateboards. Killing the dream. We did have some quick initial growth on my candidating Sundays, basically a dog and pony show where you preach your best sermon and then hope the congregation votes to have you come and preach your not so great sermons. 128 people showed up. Within weeks, we jumped up to 150. 3 years later, we had climbed all the way to 151, a growth rate of 1/3 of a person per year. Most of the time we hovered around 135, which means we were actually going backwards. So one day I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I killed the dream. I'd always been big on having clear and well-defined dreams, so much so that I had a little notebook that spelled out in great detail the house we'd live in someday, the career and mommy track my wife would take, the investments we'd make, and when and how I would write, and so on. Included was a page that described pastoring a church of 1,000 or more. It was obvious that we'd never get there at the growth rate of one person every 3 years. So I opened my notebook, took out the pastor a big church page, and threw it away. I figured that I'd badly overestimated my potential. If I didn't have the horsepower to pull it off, I didn't want to keep living with the pressure of trying to pull it off. The emotional release was amazing. No longer saddled with an unrealistic dream of growing a big church, I started to relax and enjoy the ministry I already had. At that time, I thought I'd buried a dream, but now, looking back, I realized that in reality, I'd taken my first small step toward creating a truly sticky church, one where people could belong. That's because once I gave up on the dream of reaching everyone outside the church, I was suddenly free to focus on taking care of those who were already inside the church. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is there are two types of churches in many ways. Oftentimes there are churches who have zero desire to reach people on the outside. They are happy with the 20 people or 30 or 50 or 70 people that attend their church, and if they're that way forever, they are completely satisfied with it. Then there are a lot of other churches that are part of the church growth movement where it's all about the people out there. And the way we talked about it when I was in Arkansas was that you could build a church that was, a mile wide but an inch deep. Nobody was ever growing in their faith with God. Real relationships were not happening one with another. And it seemed to be that there were those two different types of models. He goes on to write, tools or sheep. I hate to admit it, but before I killed the dream, I wasn't dialed in on tending the flock God had entrusted me with. Instead, to be brutally honest, I was using the people I already had to reach the people I wanted to reach. They weren't sheep to be cared for, they were tools to be utilized. And while I doted on every new person who came to the front door, more and more were walking out the back door. I know that sounds crass, unspiritual, and pretty lame for a pastor to admit, but it's true. Sadly, true. And what's worse, I'm not alone. I've noticed over the years that it's become increasingly fashionable for pastors and churches with a strong evangelistic and innovative bent, among whom I count myself, to claim that they don't like to be around Christians. One pastor recently told me that he didn't want any Christians coming to his new church plant. He only wanted non-Christians searching for God and new Christians who'd recently come to Christ. On one hand, I understand where he's coming from. He's tired of dealing with small-minded traditionalists who want to maintain a historical preservation society more than to fulfill the mission. But on the other hand, I fear for the unintended consequences of his outlook. If he's only going to reach out to non-Christians and nurture new Christians, what's he going to do when those new Christians become plain old Christians, the kind he hates to be around? His patience and compassion flow easily toward people caught in the addictive clutches of sin. He thinks the rough language and butchered theology of a new Christian is cool, sort of like a cute thing little kids say and do. But 2 or 3 years later, his patience runs thin, and compassion runs dry when he realizes these cute new Christians are still dealing with the same old issues. At that point, he leaves the slow growers to fend for themselves. Many quietly make their way out the back door, though he never seems to notice in the excitement of all the new folks coming through the front door. There's another large group of churches at the opposite end of the spectrum. These are the ingrown and dying churches that don't seem to care if anyone ever comes through the front door, or goes to hell for that matter. On the surface, they can appear to be focused on one another and somewhat sticky, but they're not. Ingrown and dying churches don't take care of the flock. They appease the flock, and they're not very sticky either, except for the small group of people welded tightly together at the center. These churches are a lot more like Teflon than Velcro. Just try to connect with one. You can't unless you're willing to marry a member's daughter. And I've seen that in churches also, where if you can't get in, you can't get in. So he goes on, putting the first thing first, the decision to focus on the people I already had helped to close the back door. The decision to stop advertising forced us to grow by word of mouth. The end result was not only an exponential increase in our ability to hold on to the people we already had, but also a huge increase in the ability to reach and keep new people. I now realize that's because people who come through the front door of a church through word of mouth referrals have a fundamentally different experience than do those who come as a result of marketing campaign. When it comes to reaching and keeping people, word of mouth churches have some significant advantages. In the next chapter, we'll examine 3 of these advantages in depth, but first I need to reiterate that I'm not against marketing. This is not an anti-marketing or anti-special programs book. It's a pro-stickiness book. Marketing and special programs are great outreach tools, especially if we've closed the back door and aligned what people actually experience with what we promise. What do churches promise? They promise that you're being invited into a family, right? That your needs are going to be met, that you're going to find real community when they're not finding it out there. And in many cases, there are a lot of churches where people don't find real, genuine community. And that's one thing that I've been so proud of, is that we've fostered genuine community in this church through our first launch and now moving into our second launch. It really has been you good people that God has brought and allowed us to bless and love. And then in turn, because you've been loved and blessed so much, and those of us have had a place to give and to receive, it really has become this community where we all can give and we all can receive and we enjoy one another's presence. Truly. And it's been a beautiful thing to pastor. It's been a beautiful thing for me to pastor. So the things I want to talk about here, I'm not going to read any more of that. I hope you understand why I read that. It's not the Bible. Clearly, it's not the Bible. I've got a few scriptures in here that I'll share with you in a little bit, but it is what we're trying to build. The thing that I've realized over the past 2016, wow, we're getting some weather. It's getting windy. Well, I can't hear me on the recording anymore. The thing that I realized is that the true beauty of the way that we grew the first time was by genuine care and evangelism, going places and meeting genuine people, and God opening up those avenues for us to make an impact on 1 or 2 each time that we went out. And then those people would join our community and we would love on them and we would serve them and they would serve with us. And because they had genuinely found true community, what we saw happen is they began inviting their friends. It was a word of mouth thing. They're like, you know what? I've vetted this group of people. They are kind. They are loving. They are genuine. The promises that they make, they have kept. These are my kind of people. And I talk about you guys that way. It's like, these are my kind of people. My kind of folks that are genuine and authentic. And, we joke and we laugh and, you guys don't mind that it's not professional that my children come up over my shoulder while I'm trying to speak to you. Because we truly are trying to build a family where there aren't all the pretenses of the service that's happening, that we don't have to keep up to those pretenses. What matters is that those who come find a ministry and relationships worthy of spontaneous word of mouth recommendations. When people come, even like John last week, John's been coming for, 4 months, 3 months or something like that. I don't know. When did you join, John? When did you come? When did you wander upon us here in this park? Was it back in October or September? Something like that. And then last week he brought a friend. Why? Because he genuinely has found relationship here. He's found friendship. He's found companionship and love and a place where he can belong. And really, that is what we're going to be creating here in the park. That's why I'm taking this week to talk about it, because next week we are going to be inviting people into genuine relationship. That's what we talked about on Wednesday night when we were together. How do you have a genuine conversation with somebody? How do you get to know what makes them tick? How do you become a good listener? How do you remember? How do you keep in contact with them? Why? Because it's not the church's job. It's not my job or Joel's job or Chris's job to keep a master database and this marketing push. Like, you guys get spam? Yeah. Anybody get spam in their email? How many of you just swipe those things away on your phone? Just like, I mean, it's like rapid fire. Bop, 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 bop. But if you see a name of somebody that you know, if you see and it says Jeremy Celentano on it, you're probably like, oh, hey, let me see what this says. Right? Why? Because there's relationship attached. I know those other ones are just marketing to me, you know, but when you see my name or when you see one of your names in an email or a text message, you're like, oh, it's like your text messages, right? If you get one and it's from like a 6-digit or a 5-digit number, you know it's just coupons for Wiener Schnitzel or something you signed up for, right? And you're like, okay, I'll check that out later. But if one of your friends or family members' names pops up on there and it says you have a message from, you're going to take a look at that. And this is what we're experimenting with. And it's not really an experiment. We're going to be executing on this. There are people who want to find community. There are people who don't know that they're looking for Jesus yet, but Jesus knows he's looking for them. And he's looking for them by using you as a tool to attract them to the pond that we'll be fishing in. Because when they get in that pond, they're going to meet Jesus. And when they meet Jesus, their life is going to change. You know, I think the misconception many times in Christianity is that, you know, we think that there are vast amounts of people living their lives out there who are just searching for God but can't find him. And that's really not all that true. Most people are not searching for God. God is searching for them. God found me in my sin. God found me in my brokenness. God found me in the gutter. God finds people at the end of their rope all the time when the only place they have to look is up into Jesus Christ. And we are going to be those people who are there. We're going to invite them into that stream. So what matters mostly to this ministry is that we build strong relationships, because those relationships that we build with people are going to lead them to invite people via word of mouth. We're going to do this next Sunday, and some people are going to have a really great time. And the following month, we're going to have t-shirts. I'm committing to that. We're going to have t-shirts made, and we're going to give t-shirts out. Why? Because we're going to advertise this thing. Because I want people wearing the shirt. I want them feeling like they're part of us before they're part of us. It goes to our sign. I don't know whether we're going to put it up or not. We haven't made the decision yet. Whether we're going to put up, you don't have to believe like us to be with us. But that is a general statement for being part of the community. But I'm going to give them their t-shirt, and they're going to put the t-shirt on, and they're going to be with us before they believe like us, right? They're going to wear the shirt. Why? Because people wear free t-shirts. So we're going to give out free t-shirts, right? The reality is that people don't even know that they're going to be searching for God, but they're going to find him through us. They're going to stumble upon him, not by happenstance, but because it's God's providence that he sent his son to die on the cross and live through us in our time and place, that we would reach people who are broken, hurting, and need the love and kindness and compassion of Jesus Christ. There's this idea in what he was talking about in the book, secure before you fill. And I think one thing, and this is one thing I've been talking to Joel about, is that I know that when we launched Activate Church, we were very intent on caring for people, making sure they felt welcomed when they came, inviting them in so they didn't feel like an outsider. I remember when Linda came, years ago, probably 2019, or what year? 3 years ago, 2019. 2019, I think, is when you came. And I think you stumbled up because of the sign, and you came upon us, and I know that meeting, that time you spent with us, because you've said that it was impactful, that you were cared for and introduced to people and loved in that day. And that's something that I'm so proud of, that you guys do that organically. It's not natural that a lot of churches do those things, right? Some of us are kind of wired that way, but the rest of us are kind of learning to be that way. You go, you know what, I'm not necessarily naturally a connector, But I'm learning, if you see somebody alone and over there, there's enough compassion in your heart because you've been part of this community that you're like, I should go talk to them instead of staying in this conversation that I'm in right now. I should invite them into their next step. So I'm super proud of that. This idea of securing before you fill, we do have a sticky church. When people come, they do connect with us. Then they move away and go out of state. Shame on you people. Shame on you people. I hope they watch that. I hope I get a text message later this week. Shame on you people. Just kidding. Honest to God, I'm super proud of that too, because those people who have moved away are perpetuating in ways that we did here. They're perpetuating what we did here. And it's so cool to have conversations with Daniel or with Louis and what he's trying to do in their church and change their, the culture there, the people that they're getting in with there. It's really cool what's going on. So secure before you fill. Become sticky. I've been part of a church that had a huge front door. When I was in Arkansas, I was over our community life. I was over all of our guest experiences and all of that. And at the end of the month, we would make between 70 and 140 phone calls inviting first-time guests to our on-ramp at the end of the month, where we would invite them in for a dinner and have a dinner with the staff and the elders of the church and answer some of their questions and try to help get them involved. 140 people a month. Now you'd think that church was growing by leaps and bounds, right? You got 70 to 140 people coming in a month. The problem is, like this guy was talking about, is the back door was just wide open. And even though we had this huge funnel, it wasn't stopped. It's like having an igloo with a spigot on at the bottom and trying to fill it up and wondering why it never gets full. It's just running out of the bottom. So what I want us to realize is that we can have the propensity, as it starts to get larger, as we start to build a community, we can lose sight of making sure that we're connecting the new person, right? And making sure people that are making connections with other people. That was one of the things we talked about on Wednesday night, is being a connector. When you find somebody, what we should be doing is getting to know each other. Why? Because I know all of us that are here have different skills, abilities, and desires and hobbies and all those things. I know if somebody comes in and they say, you know what, my heart really is like, I love what you guys are doing here, but I'm not really a food person or this, but I just really have a heart for the homeless people. Okay, let me introduce you to my friend Melissa and my friend Linda. Why? Because that's really one of the things that makes their heart tick. Like, Linda goes out, and I kind of get frustrated with her sometimes, and I'm being honest here, because she goes out and she tells me on Sunday, hey, I went out this week and I did this and I did that. And I was like, why didn't you invite us? Like, why? Are you embarrassed of us, Linda? Are you embarrassed of us people? I know. I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you. But what I know, the point that I'm making, is each of you have different skills, you have different hobbies, you have different interests and different abilities. And the more we know about each other, the more we have the ability to connect new people to people who have those same hobbies. If if somebody were to come into our church early on and they were an engineer or something, I was like, you know what, I want to introduce you to my friend Bart. Why? Because he's a civil engineer, and that's what he does all day long, and you guys can talk shop and talk a common language that I don't even understand. I don't even get it, but you guys are going to get it, and it's going to give you a reason to come back. Hopefully there's a spark there of a relationship. It's about creating a sticky community, a sticky church, because that's what God has called us to be, is to care for those who come in, care for them in all of their needs. Sadly, a lot of churches have a revolving door. There's a desire on the part of many churches to reach as many people as possible at the expense of growing the people that they have. Again, I said a mile wide and an inch deep. I believe, I scratched that out. I wrote this years ago, and I was reading through my notes, and early on I said, I believe that if we grow strong believers that don't do life alone, we'll create a church where in fact every member is a minister and life change is happening all the time. I said that I believed it because I hadn't experienced it at that point. But I scratched that out. I actually put a strike through in the word believe, and I wrote no next to it, because I know that now. I know that if we create a community where people come and they're cared for, and we invite them into mission with us, and we have those conversations, and we build relationship, and we can speak the truth in love, and we can be reminded of what the Word of God says for our lives, then we will grow together continually. And they will deepen. And it's not all up to me to minister to people. We all become the ministers of the gospel. It's beautiful. We want life change in the church, not people to churn. That's why we have to close the back door. So how do we do that? We all have to take ownership in the mission and building the kingdom, ourselves and each other. Taking ownership. Reading your Bible each day. Speaking to God. Being sensitive to His Holy Spirit. When you're in a crowd like we're going to have and people are all going around, it's really easy to get caught up in the moment and forget that we're actually on a mission and we're fishing. Make sure you're continually baiting your line. You know, you're continually casting it in. When you got a fish and you put them in the basket and they're connected somewhere else, like, remember, we're still fishermen. We're still fishing out of this pool to connect with people. Acts 2:42. It says this. It says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to breaking of bread and to prayer. This is where you guys come in. The things that we do here are something, but your alone time with God, your time throughout the rest of the week when we're not together, that is the devoting yourself to the teachings, to reading, to fellowship, to breaking bread. This is the building of the church. This is what builds the fabric of the community of faith. All the little things that happen outside. I hear oftentimes that, I just get so tickled. And that's a word my mom would use, and that's just coming to my mind. I feel so tickled when I hear, Melissa's like, oh yeah, Linda was over and we were doing this. And I was like, yes, these people are connecting outside of this gathering. These people are getting to know each other. Oh, so-and-so was sick and we brought them some food and I didn't even orchestrate it. It's like, yes, bravo, that's the church being the church. And it's a beautiful thing. Now, I'm going to get to the hard part for some. It's the hard part for some of us. We're going to have to make new friendships with new people that will take precedent to our own desires. All right? I know it's easy when there's a lot going on and you have a friend that maybe you only see once a week or every other week or something like that. It's really easy to get caught up and go, hey, I'm going to take this time to sit down and for 2.5 hours, we're just going to talk shop and we're going to have a good time here. That's not what we're doing. We're meeting new people. We're moving them into the life of this community that we found ourselves in. So we are, generally, people are naturally exclusive, right? I mean, you live your life, and I've had people over the years of pastoring. Look, when you're the center of, when you're at the center of a church that's running 1,000 people, everybody feels like they know you, and they have a deep relationship with you, and yet you kind of know them a little bit, right? And over that period of time, you can have people that are like, that will say things like, I didn't feel like I was included in that thing. Well, it's like I can't include 1,000 people in everything that we do. So we are naturally exclusive. I'll go back to what we were talking about just a minute ago. It's not a bad thing that Linda wants to go do something spontaneous for homeless people, but unless she intentionally goes out of her way to invite some of us or the rest of us to go with her, you're naturally exclusive in the things that you do, correct? You follow what I'm saying? Like, unless you intentionally invite people in. I have dinner at my house with my family nearly every single night. But only sometimes when I've been intentional have I invited you guys to be at the dinner table with us. It's not natural that you guys are at our dinner table. So we're naturally exclusive unless we shift what we're doing and we intentionally invite people in. So the hard part is that we're going to have to make new friendships with new people, and that'll take precedent to our own desires. Sometimes, anybody with me, they're like, you know what, I know I should invite somebody over or something, but I just want to sit on the couch and I want to eat my meal, I want to sit at my table, I don't want to be with anybody. I just want to do this myself. We're going to have to fight that battle. That's a battle in our mind. I have a friend, I got two friends in Arkansas, John and Amy, and John was always down to do whatever, and his wife Amy, as soon as she got off work, she went home, she put her sweats on, and she was ready. She was like in lounge mode until it was bedtime, right? So whenever it was time to, if they wanted to do something, or we wanted to do something together, it was like, hey John, let's go do this, or we'll come over, or you guys come over. And he'd tell me it's always hard to get Amy to, put clothes on and go do that thing, or get ready to have people come over. But the funniest part was once you were together and Amy was dressed up and thing was going on, she would be the one who was never ready to leave. It was like, well, once it was happening, she was never ready to actually go home. And she would be ecstatic to have people over. So the hard part for us is going to be building these new friendships, being intentional about inviting people in, because we are naturally exclusive. We have to work at being inclusive. It takes effort on my part to invite you into my family. It takes no effort at all to exclude you unless you're very pushy. Then it does take some effort. It's like, no, you need to go away. But most people aren't this way. Even when we're invited into the home, it's still easy to be sidelined. It's still easy to exclude. That's why big churches, in many ways, you can be invited in. There's an invite sign, and somebody's like, welcome. They greeted you at the door. And yet once you got in there, if somebody wasn't intentional, I've heard thousands of stories. If I've heard one, I've heard 10,000 stories of people who have gone to a big church or a medium-sized church, and they've gone there for years, and they never made a meaningful relationship because people were not intentional. And that's not who we are. It's not who we're called to be. That's not who Jesus was. He always went to somebody. He always would go to the outsider, continue to bring people in. We have to grow. You and I have to grow from being attenders, and we don't necessarily have to do this, but because we are in many ways acting this way already, to being guides. We need to guide people in and help them find their path to the center so they can belong. I want us to feel pressure to lead and engage new people when we're together, and to go deeper with those who we already know. You might say, oh yeah, I like doing the Sunday lunch thing. I like going to lunch. Okay. Well, invite somebody that you do Sunday lunch with, or somebody here, onto another thing. One time I was blown away. My neighbor, Scott, he's at home all the time, mostly by himself. A good guy, very friendly. We invited him over, I think, 3 or 4 years ago for Thanksgiving, and he came to Thanksgiving. And I knew his dad was a sprint car racer or something like that, right? Help me, Randy. Sprint cars. And I know that Randy's into racing too. Goes to Top Fuel dragster races and stuff like that. And I was like, if I get these two to talk a little bit, I think they'll probably connect. And I was just blown away by Randy because they sat there for, I thought Scott was going to come for an hour and leave or so. And I think we were cleaning up. It was late at night. My wife had already taken off with Amanda to go shopping, Black Friday shopping. And we've got all the chairs and tables pulled down. And it's Jen and Randy and Scott sitting at the table in my backyard. And they are just talking shop. They're just going to town. And it was so cool to watch them connect and have those similar interests. And then, Scott tells me later, he's like, oh yeah, Randy invited me to go to Pomona or something with him. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. Those secondary invites. Yes, we met. Yes, we had a good time. But are we moving people in further and deeper into relationship with us and relationship outside of these gatherings and closer to God? Are we inviting them into our rhythm? Are we inviting them into our stream? So as we build these relationships, I want to see those secondary relationships happening. Not just, hey, I like sitting with this person at Sunday lunch, or if we go out, or I'll hang around this person, but start doing life outside of that and creating a culture outside of that. I've already seen some of that in you guys, and I love that you're doing that. This is us becoming more and more sticky. And the thing that we get to model, and I'll say this, they're not going to watch it, but when Joel and myself and Chris started planning some things together, Joel and I immediately realized that because of who we've been for the last several years, on the, I'd say, more cutting edge of getting out there and being different and sticky and all those things, Joel said, I recognize that, Activate is here, Radiant is here, and Grace is here in kind of where we fall. And yet, Radiant is feeling like we need to be more evangelistic. We need to be doing more of the things like Activate is doing, and that's why they're partnering with us. And Grace is there too. And the one thing that we get to do, you and I get to do, is we get to model who God has shaped us to be for Radiant and for Grace. Say, oh, look, if you do these things, and God will grow your attendance and grow the community and, get people connected and grow their faith, and God will change hearts and minds, and it's a beautiful thing that happens. So we get to lead in some regards that way, and part of us just being here in the park is them coming along and saying, you know what, there's fish out there, and they're definitely not coming in here. So we have to go out there where the fishing is. We have to get to the lake. Literally, there's a lake right there. By the way, if any of you guys know how to do a run a fishing derby, I want to do one of those in the sun in the summertime. So I think it'd be really cool to have a lot of kids catch their first fish, or potentially some of my kids would all catch their first fish if they got one over there. So I want us to feel pressure to lead and to engage new people when we're together, and to go deeper with those who we already know. So what do I mean? I mean, engage with those you don't know and include them in what you're doing. And then get them to engage deeper. Be attractive. Attract them into deeper and deeper relationship. Grow with those you do know. Invite them to do things with you in your personal life. Don't just see them when we happen to be together. Grow in personal relationship with them outside of this. It's like, how many of you guys have ever worked in an office? It's like, how many of you guys are like, man, I love many of the people I have in my office complex, right? Or, you feel like those are deep and lasting friendships. I was having this conversation with Easton this week. He thinks that, like, his middle school friends are just, like, they're his best friends in the whole world. And I said, Easton, here's what I know. Most everybody I know that's my age or even 30 years old, they don't even remember who their middle school friends were. I'm not saying they're not important people. But I'm saying if you don't intentionally invite them into your life regularly, you will not be friends with them long term over a long period of time. How do I know this? Because out of all the people that I went to high school with, I still talk to 2 of them. And some of them are really good friends. And my best man, who was my best friend in high school, I don't even talk to him very often. I mean, it's like once a month that we text or so-and-so, and we hardly ever even get together, not because we don't like each other, but because we're not intentional about it. So I want to remind us to be intentional, that these relationships that we're building and these people we're going to connect with, as you connect with them, and just be sticky. Invite them into something else. Invite them into their next step, because it's not going to be the next church service that is what gets them to keep coming around. It's going to be a relationship with you, and the relationship that you have with God with them is what's going to transform their lives. That's enough said. We'll just end it right there, John. It's a good place to put a pin in it, right? Until next time, let's pray. Jesus, I'm so thankful that you've made us all different, that you wired us all differently. In many ways, I look at even my own children and the things that really make them tick. I just find zero to little interest in, and yet I know that you've wired them that way for good reason, so that they can be connectors of people, friends that they grow relationship with, that they can connect them to you. So God, I pray that each of us that are here that the desires we have, the interests that we have. God, I pray that you would remind us that you gave us those interests, that you made us that way, that you wired us that way just for this time, this moment in history, to connect your children with you, to build relationships. And as we build those relationships, find joy in living life and doing life with people who love you and who are serving alongside us and enjoying life alongside us. I pray that you would continue to build into life a real richness for each of us. That we don't dread getting up every day and going day by day, but we anticipate and look forward to the richness and the good gifts that you give us in life. So God, I pray for those who we're going to connect with. God, I thank you that you already have these encounters prepared in advance for us. And not just in what we're going to do in the park, but I pray that the Holy Spirit would open our eyes to the encounters and contacts that we will bump into over the course of the week and over the course of the coming months and this year. So God, let us be sensitive to what you're doing, and let us invest fully into growing your kingdom and finding people, serving them, and introducing them to you. We ask these things in your name. Amen.